good morning, good afternoon, good evening. However you're watching, wherever you're watching, however you're listening, wherever you're listening. It's the Bet Online Salute to Troy podcast. Last time you saw us, these two great gentlemen had Brenden Rice on. Excellent interview, guys. Let's kick it off to the man who probably is happy, the most happy right now because he is a native of Colorado. Ryan Dyrute, how are you doing today?
Doing great, but I'm mixed because obviously you're alluding to the Nuggets beating the Lakers, but I try to not mention too much since our following is mostly LA based. But also I'm an Avalanche fan, and they gave up 7 goals yesterday and lost 7-6 in their opener. So not often do you have 45 shots, score 6 goals and lose. But anyway, that's a whole other story. But happy to be here with you guys talking spring game and all things SC.
And we move to the man with 14 PhDs, 37 masters, and 16 undergrads. The mad scientist himself, Jamal Madman Maggie. How are you doing today?
Doing well, Coach. Great to see you. Obviously, I share in the condolences with Game 1 of the Nuggets-Lakers. Up 12 in the second quarter. We thought we had it, but let's be real, we never had it. We've lost 9 straight to these guys. I don't know if this core can do it, but excited to chat with you. And Colorado Rye, I love the Rockies hat too with the LAFB shirt. It shares, the both the loves down the middle. I love it.
I didn't do that on purpose, I promise. More just because it's black. So
Brad, is he sticking it to us a little bit after Game 1 subliminally?
Well, there's no way as a Rockies fan I could stick you anything. So at least that's where it brings me back down to earth real quick.
At one point, the Rockies only had 4 games won this season.
They're so bad.
They're already done.
They're
already done.
A Rockies fan season, literally, it's fun for opening day, and then it ends. It ends very quickly.
The days of Larry Walker are long gone.
Don't worry, Rye. I'm sure that second consecutive NBA title will wash the tears away pretty quickly.
Exactly. If we could somehow, and NHL Stanley Cup, we'll say. So anyway.
Definitely. So, test time happened, guys. They all got together at the Coliseum. Spring ball is over, and we have the spring game. Let's get into the spring game. The first thing I'm going to say about the spring game, one thing I did notice, and one thing I always commented about last year on my heavy critique of the Grinch who stole the national championship, was there were never enough hats to the ball. Never enough hats to the ball. The first thing I noticed watching the spring game, there was always at least 3 hats going to the ball. There's always 2 hats on a receiver. And I said that last year on our live. I'm like, somehow Lynn makes it to where you always have 2 hats when a wide receiver's coming. It's very few one-on-ones. There's always help somewhere. I don't know. I would love to sit down and talk his defense with him. And I should have asked Coach Henney that, can I come and talk defense with you guys? That was my fault. But what I saw, Jamal, you're probably going to kill me, but I'm low-key hyped because the defense is a lot better. The defense is this is different. The hype around this should be around the defense. Are we going to get the defense better? And I understand it's a control test. I know there's a bunch of things to make it work, but I see things that are a lot different. I look at it from a different perspective. The effort was way better, right? You didn't see a lot of people get smoked in the secondary, right? And that's going to happen no matter what defense you're on. Corners are going to lose some every now and then. But the effort and how many hats are running to the ball, the final score is 49-27 or something like that. That never happens in a spring ball game. Normally the offense, because it's so controlled, the offense takes over. There's something brewing different here. I was happy what I saw with the defense. Now we have to take it to the next step and translate it into a real-time game situation. Madman, what do you think about the spring game?
Yeah, no, Coach, I think you said it really well. I mean, 3 things really stuck out. Let's start defensively. I think 3 things really stuck out, and I think you alluded to it. One is I think the level of athlete is a little bit different this year than it was last year. I think you've got some similar guys, but particularly in the secondary, particularly kind of on the edge, it just felt a different level of athlete from this year to last year. A little bit longer, a little bit stronger, ability to kind of cover more coverage of the field in fewer steps. So I think level of athlete, I think has been improved. I think number two, you've got a situation, to your point, Fred, where guys are swarming to the ball. So I think schematically, you're seeing kind of more of a cohesive element, guys getting to the ball better, more disruptive. And then third is effort. I think there was just sort of a motor that exists this year that wasn't there in years past. So when you combine athlete with scheme, with effort, I think it just stylistically looks different. It just hits different on your eye than what we've been used to seeing with Alex Grinch the past couple of years. So it's been really refreshing. I think in terms of the game itself, tactically, obviously you have to sort of start with the secondary. They really balled out and just showed just the variety of athletes in that secondary, the level of depth in that secondary. 4 interceptions overall. I mean, you saw guys like DeCarlos Nicholson make plays. You saw guys like Prophet Brown make plays. Marcellus Williams looked phenomenal in his interception. A lot of speed out there and a lot of being able to kind of get into traffic, get into passing lanes, and really disrupt. Now, obviously, the offense also had its moments through the air with 396 yards passing, but the fact that the secondary was able to disrupt so much, I think that's takeaway number one. And then I think beyond that, I think, you see where there's opportunity for maybe some improvement. I think not having Bear Alexander in the game, you sort of felt a little bit of a void in the interior, and you're starting to understand why he was so important to keep over the last few weeks with NIL, because I think the Trojans look quite good on the edge with the likes of Anthony Lucas and with the likes of Jamil Muhammad, and then you've got Kamarian Fountain kind of looking like a guy who can do some things as well. But I think you've got some nice guys on the edge. I think it was in that interior of the line, you felt like there was a little bit of a void. So having Bear Alexander there is going to be pivotal, and I think getting some depth there is going to be pivotal. I think the other takeaway is the offensive line is solid, not spectacular, perhaps even a little bit pedestrian. And I think there's sort of an opportunity to fortify that offensive line here in the next week over the course of the transfer portal. And then my last takeaway is Miller Moss clearly looking like QB1. We talked a lot about it after the Holiday Bowl. It was his team. Maiava, is he going to come in and push Miller Moss? Can he do some things on the field that Miller Moss can't do? Ultimately, though, this is sort of Miller Moss's team, to Lincoln Riley's point. So, Fred, lots to sort of unpack there, but just the eye test looks different defensively. I think the secondary really jumps out. I think the offensive and defensive lines are still a little bit pedestrian, particularly on the interior of that defensive line. And then I think Miller Moss clearly establishing himself as QB1. So those were my 4 or 5 takeaways from spring.
Ryan.
Yeah, this is a game where, regardless of it being, kind of a pseudo practice and not full live, as a fan, you wanted it to go like this, where the defense kind of showed out and the offense maybe had some hiccups, but I don't think anyone's really worried a ton about the offense because of what Lincoln Riley can do. Obviously, you want to see some good progression. I think they showed some ceiling stuff, but you wanted the defense to come out and show vast improvement, which I think was clear. I'll just throw a few other things out, so I'm not just repeating Jamal. First, I meant to text you guys, and I feel bad I didn't, but Coach, they set the edge on defense.
Yes.
They were setting the edge on defense. That's the other, I was thinking you were going to say that, not about hats to the ball, but you say it every week last season. They where's the edge? They don't set the edge. They did have an edge.
They did have an edge on the defense. That is correct. I was more happy that they were getting 3 or 4 hats to the ball and setting the edge. You know what I mean? Like that was. I mean that means more to me than the edge. You know what I mean? It's like 1A and 1B.
Yeah, totally. So, but anyway, I just noticed that it made me chuckle. One other point I think is the youth movement. I remember last spring game. I mean, there wasn't a whole lot to talk about the defense, period, but certainly not in terms of, the incoming freshmen of showing out. Guys played obviously, but I remember we didn't have this show like this with us three, but we talked about it, and we mentioned Quinten Joyner, Peterson, the young freshman backs that looked good. A couple of the receivers, obviously Zachariah Branch and those guys. We talked about Malachi Nelson, who had his debut, and it was underwhelming. But we didn't talk at all about any outside of that, and especially any young defenders. And when you look at Marcellus Williams, incoming freshman, as Jamal mentioned, Cam Fountain, dude's going to probably be playing, he's going to be challenging for starting time at the edge there. I mean, these are young incoming freshmen that were getting reps right off the bat and utilizing them and playing very well on offense. Brian Jackson, a running back that really no one's talked about, and he looked great. He was kind of the number 3 guy after Joyner. Him and Peterson were splitting reps a little bit, but Jackson getting a little more of the nod early on. So I think there's a lot of good, solid. Xavier Jordan, also receiver, finished with, I think, 4 catches, 40 yards or so. So a good mix of the youth getting in there right off the bat. And these are kids still in high school, so that's exciting to see. And then the last point I'll make is these transfers on defense, I think, showing how important they are. Jamal mentioned DeCarlos Nicholson had that great interception. I thought he played well. He showed his length. You look at the back end, clearly Akili Arnold and Kamari Ramsey are your starting safety pair, and they looked really good and good leadership there. And then, maybe the biggest one is, Easton Arnold, excuse me, who's just going to be a tremendous Mike linebacker, great leader, everywhere, knows the football. And so he's, as they've said all camp, just a true Mike that's going to run the defense. So you could see it pretty clear how important he'll be to the defense as that true kind of middle linebacker. So those are kind of my additional takeaways. And then I think Miller Moss, I agree. Obviously had the 2 picks. One was not a great decision. One was just a bang play at the goal line where the defense made a great play on the ball and was able to get the tip drill with Prophet Brown. But Miller Moss, I think, is your guy, your leader. But it was fun to see Jayden Maiava. He definitely brings a different element. We've kind of toyed the idea that this will not be a 2 quarterback system. That's not what Lincoln Riley will do, but wouldn't shock me if they have a couple packages that Maiava can run, whether it's 2-point drills, whatever it is, because he gives you that kind of element of athleticism. So overall, I think a good day for the football program based on how the season ended.
I will say this. I like what DeAnton Lynn is doing with Gentry, Cobb, and Arnold. I think that puts them in a better situation than when you see how they set the edge. Because Cobb is a downhill linebacker. I'm going to say this. He's probably going to be the most underrated linebacker going into the NFL draft. And he will probably have the longest longevity in the NFL because how much he plays downhill and on the other side of the line of scrimmage. When you set the edge, you see how good Mason Cobb could be. When you don't set the edge and have him running to try to go make plays, you think he struggles, right? He's putting him in a better situation to make plays. And the same thing with Gentry. He's putting him out of space, using his athleticism and his length to make him a better player. So those are the things that I really saw in the change. I also like how it's a true 4-down system. It's not the 3-3-5 hybrid speed thing. You're setting the edge, you're a defensive end. If you're going to play a 3, play a 3. If you're going to play a 2, play a 2. You're the 1 tech, you're the 3 tech. There's no shifting and moving around and no fancy stuff. They're playing football. That's all they're doing, right? And so that makes them a lot better, and it puts them in a better situation to win football games and to be a sound defense on the field, which gives them an opportunity to give the offense another opportunity. So that's another thing that I like. I will say this too. Number 6 was balling, bro. Y'all better watch out. Those fall shandies are coming. Number 6 was balling. Number 6 had him a nice little game. He had a big catch. Hey, the Miller Lemon connection is coming. I might be drinking shandies all fall. I'm gonna end it on that one. What you guys got anything to that, Jamal, Ryan? You guys got anything to cap off the spring game?
Yeah, I mean, you never have to worry about receiver at USC, and I think there's been a lot of conversation around, well, they don't have enough experience, or, well, there isn't really a true number 1. I mean, I think all of that is going to work itself out and emerge from now until game 1 against LSU. I think when you just have the talent that you do with Lane and Branch and Lemon and Deuce and Hudson, I really think that that's not an issue really. I mean, it's so fascinating because there's sort of an air of similarity on both sides of the ball in terms of where you're sort of feeling comfortable, because it's, receiver and secondary are probably USC's deepest positions. When you talk about kind of captain of both units, you got Miller Moss on one side and you've got Easton Mascarenas Arnold on the other side. I think it's a little bit on the interior of both sides you're worried about in terms of depth, but there's sort of a mirror imaging that's kind of taken place on both sides of the ball right now, which is really fascinating to see. I think, look, what we're going to expect this year based on what we've seen out of spring, this defense is going to be significantly better. And this was a defense that was in the 110s last year. So even if they're in the 50s this year, you're looking at an opportunity where the offense just has so much more margin for error in that Lincoln Riley system. Now, is the offense going to be potentially as explosive as it was last year? Hard to say that is the case when you lose Caleb Williams, when you lose the Heisman Trophy winner. But I expect the offense to be probably 75% of what it was last year in terms of explosiveness. But then when you've got a defense that's so much better in a significant fashion, I think that's going to sort of offset in terms of a net positive situation. So I think improvement is imperative. I think that's evident. And I think this team is headed very much in the right direction. Now it comes down to, health, matchups, development from now until the start. But all of the right ingredients are in place here, particularly on defense. Guys actually know where to line up. Guys actually know what their jobs are. And guys actually know how to play with each other. So the bar was pretty low with Grinch last year, and DeAnton Lynn and Eric Henderson have certainly crossed that with flying colors.
Let me ask you this question, Jamal. And before we get to you, Ryan, let me ask you this question. Do you think with a number 50 defense this year, right, and how explosive the receivers in the secondary is, the fact that the quarterback is Miller Moss and he's more of a we guy and not a me guy, do you think that makes them a better team?
Oh, absolutely. I think I think USC this year, I mean, this is not going to be an 8-5 team. I think if this is sort of an 8-5 team this year, something has gone drastically wrong. I think when you look at where they are defensively, there's one or two wins, just on the defense being better than what it was last year. Mm-hmm. And I think with Miller Moss, the level of continuity in terms of him kind of setting up his receivers, understanding the offense, and not really having this sort of element of separation. This year, just from in 23, it was just Caleb, and how is Caleb going to adjust to his guys, and how are his guys going to adjust to Caleb? The point of departure was just sort of this separation. It was sort of Caleb and the Trojans, and how are they going to come together? With Miller Moss, it's none of that. It's sort of an offensive unit. So I think with the chemistry on offense, I think that chemistry is going to overcome some of the genius that Caleb Williams was able to provide, particularly in improvisational contexts. And I think they're going to be good enough. And then I think the defense just being so much better than what it was going to be last year, I think net, you're looking at least being 2 wins better, if not more.
Yeah. But if they do end up 6-0, it's going to become Miller Moss and the Trojans, and we have to see how Miller Moss handles that. But that's neither here nor there. But I think, in my opinion, that Miller Moss kind of gives me like a John David Booty, if that makes sense. Like, he's in his own world, but his own world isn't outside the universe of the team. And when I say that, like, John David didn't really hang out with us. John David would go to training table, eat his food, go watch some film, go home. You wouldn't see John David at the 2-9. You wouldn't see John David at Traddy's. You wouldn't see John David at the 9-0. He never really hung out. They said he hung out at like some bar on like the outskirts of Hollywood. But when it came to Saturday, John David was about USC. Like, when it came to practice, John David was about USC. When he was around the guy, he was about USC. Miller Moss gives me kind of that feel too. I just think he's a little bit better than John David. I think Miller Moss can get SC to the promised land, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you, Fred. I mean, I love John David. I mean, he was Obviously that was your quarterback when you were there, and I had just graduated from USC, and two-time Rose Bowl MVP, and still has the record for most touchdown passes in the Rose Bowl, between his two appearances. I think John David was the perfect kind of system quarterback for what, the team was running at that particular time. The one knock with John David, if you recall this, Fred, is it was the release point. How many batted balls did John David have over the course of his career? How many interceptions as a result of kind of low throws? He just didn't get enough air under the ball. And he couldn't really kind of air it out. And as a result of that, you were very confined in like a 20-yard radius. You had to use the tight ends. You had to use the fullbacks back in the day. It was hard to kind of loosen up those offenses in 06 and 07 because there was just sort of a lack of verticality. I don't see that being the case with Miller Moss, Exhibit A being the Holiday Bowl and just the number of deep shots and the verticality there. So I think you kind of get the best of John David in the sense of, hey, he's a team guy. He's not going to bring additional attention to himself. And then you get the best of what he doesn't have, which is a little bit more of that arm strength, a little bit more zip on the ball, a little bit more velocity, a little bit more range. So I completely agree with you there.
I don't even remember John David doing an interview, to be honest with you. That's what I'm saying. That's he was just to himself, but he was a great guy. Ryan, you want to wrap up the spring game? What are your final thoughts?
Yeah.
Spring game.
Yeah. No, I think last guy to mention, Woody Marks, I think looked really good. Running back transfer. Again, how much can you take from a non-full live tackling? But seemed to hit the hole well. He's going to be a use in the passing game. We might even see the running backs as a whole used more in the passing game, which I know we were like pining for last year. So I think that, and obviously in this game too, they're running a very vanilla offense. So they're not giving LSU much to go off of for this offense. So we're not seeing all that. But I thought he looked good. And I thought it was interesting to go kind of back to the defense on Thursday, the last media practice in Gentry's time. He had mentioned at the end, and he kind of tailed off. So I didn't hear exactly what they do, but after every workout, he said they do what they call a 116. Now, I don't know if it's 116 seconds of something. I didn't know what it was, but they call it the 116 because they were the 116th ranked defense last year. And so he's like, I'll never forget, basically, essentially reading between the lines, how bad we were because we do a 116 every day and we're never going to be that again. So from 116 to 50, I think you hear these national people, and I heard, who was it talking about the defense in the spring game? It'll come to me in a minute, but I think a lot of national people will come out and like, oh, well, you can't improve that much and this, and just, they need more 5-star players and this and that. And look, we're not asking for this to be a top 10 defense. Like, get to 50, and that's a 2-game difference. Like, get to just 50. Like, just be able to stop a nosebleed, and we're good. Like, we can increase our winning. So, and I don't see that being a problem because, again, just based on the eye test of what we've seen so far, a lot still needs to transpire and improve. But it was definitely a good, positive movement towards or what's needed to happen. So it was a good day for the program.
Ryan, just what's interesting with what you said, and yeah, that was a great point about Gentry and the 116. It's for the talk about the improvement, right? I mean, look how much UCLA improved defensively last year with Lynn, right? It went from 87 to 11. So that was 76 spots that UCLA jumped in 1 year with DeAnton Lynn. Now, I think UCLA's defensive players last year were better than USC's players this year. Yeah. So to say it's going to be 76 is kind of a stretch, but hey, are they 2/3 as good? Sure. And so can you jump 50 spots in theory? Absolutely. And if you jump 50 spots, now you've gone from 116 to 66. And so, if this team is sort of 66 on defense this year, I think that's going to put them in a position to be in every game that they're going to be playing. And then it's going to just kind of come down to execution and timing and pressure and all of those things. So I think if this team can even be kind of like we talked about 50s or 60s, it's going to make a sizable difference in terms of the season outlook.
Yeah,
it sounds so average being happy with 50 and 60.
Well, as improvement. Then the next year you get the top 10. Just being realistic. Last thing I'll say though, because I thought this was interesting, Miller Moss in his press conference. A lot of guys usually won't and I don't think he was doing it at all. I know he wasn't going to throw anyone under the bus, but a lot of guys won't really talk about the last season, or they'll talk about it very nonchalant. But, you know, I can't remember what he was asked, but talking about just playing against this defense. And he had mentioned how, you know, this time last year, guys were just running wide open in practice. Like, basically, I'm paraphrasing, but basically saying, like, it was a lot of open windows against this defense last year. And he said those windows aren't there anymore this year. So, you know, take that for what you want. Obviously, he's hyping up his guys now, but, you know, that usually coaches, quarterback's not going to call out his, because there's a lot of teammates that were there last year too. So I found that interesting. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. He's legit being honest and open about it, how defense has vastly improved.
His teammates knew the problem. Don't worry about it. You're not throwing the teammates on the bus.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Jamil Muhammad admitted it too. He's like, yeah, this is completely different from last year.
Well, even Lincoln Riley said Jamil Muhammad has become a better player in this scheme. You know what I mean? So, yeah. So there's a lot of stuff that's going down. Moving forward, before we wrap this thing up, transfer portal news, breaking news. The Trojans signed Greedy Vance out of Kentucky. The top corner.
Florida State.
I'm sorry. Florida State. You're right. It's out of Florida State. The top corner in the transfer portal. I'll let you guys comment on it first before I give my humble opinion on it. So let's start with Jamal. We'll go to Ryan, and then I'll give my opinion. Go ahead, Jamal.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. You know, it's one of those things where we've talked so much about this secondary room being so deep, and when we just had the conversation about 4 different guys having interceptions in the spring game, and we haven't even talked about Beavers, and we haven't talked about Ramsey. We didn't even talk about Arnold. I know. Ryan, you mentioned it, but none of those guys didn't make interceptions or really had, you know, huge consistent plays. So you're talking about a room that's 8 or 9 deep. So at first pass, you know, Greedy Vance, a really good player, obviously been at Florida State a number of years, 171 career tackles, 4 career interceptions, 12 career pass defenses. So definitely put a nice body of work together. Part of the Florida State team that, you know, could have or should have been in the college football playoff last year. So a lot of big game experience, sort of a winning mentality. So a lot of positives. Obviously, you look at it from a depth perspective that, hey, you always kind of want to be deep at certain positions, wide receiver being one, secondary being the other. So a lot to like there. But if you are going to go spend time, spend money, spend energy on recruiting, I would much rather the team focus on offensive line and interior defensive linemen at this point. So in that regard, it's very puzzling because for all of the positives that we're talking about this season, all rightfully so, the one thing that can derail this team in 2024 is the offensive line. If the offensive line doesn't show up and Miller Moss doesn't have the requisite time to be able to do what he needs to do in terms of reading defenses, going through his progressions and making the right throws, it disrupts everything that you do, especially when you aren't the improvisational whiz that Caleb Williams was. So for that reason, when you look at the different positions on the field and you're saying, look, we still need to kind of tighten up here on offensive line because that could be the one Achilles heel that separates this from being a really good season to a good season to a bad season. And so when you kind of take that mindset, you understand everything that you went through with Bear recently, I would have thought that the focus would have been on O-line and D-line more. But having said that, look, never a bad thing to get another guy, but puzzling for those reasons.
Go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah, just to kind of add on it, you know, it's interesting too, because, and this is, I'd be curious, not that maybe we can one day, but curious to talk to Dan Land and Lincoln Riley about how, because how do you define these guys? Do you define them as a defensive back or as a true cornerback? Because if you look at the rooms, you have, as it stands, you have 10 safeties, which is a lot, 10 safeties, which is crazy. And then but you have 7 corners with Fagan transferring. So I think when you look at just purely corner numbers, you know, having 8 is a good number to have when you look at injuries. We look at the injuries they had last year. And I'm just spitballing, but I think from that instance, like, okay, adding another corner maybe makes sense to get that number to 8. But after seeing what we saw, I mean, he's a depth piece now. I mean, talented guy, but I think you have your starters in place already. Like, obviously you want to come in and compete, and hey, if he pushes guys or he ends up taking that over, great. That's fantastic. But to me, this feels like a depth piece now, because what we saw to Jacoby Covington, who we didn't mention, has looked great. And he looked great down the stretch last year. And DeCarlos Nicholson, as we mentioned, Jaylin Smith didn't even play, who's going to be more of your nickel, whatever you want to call him, a safety or a corner. He's kind of been battling injuries, but he'll be, fighting for a starting spot out there. So feels like depth. He was out on a visit. So, but again, what it comes down to, what was the NIL package? And as Jamal said, if it cost a lot, then that's where this becomes questioning it. If it didn't cost him anything, and he just wanted to play for Coach Belk and Dantlin and be with USC, then no qualms about it, and that's great. But that's something we may never find out. So overall, though, I'd say I'm happy with it.
Right. What would be interesting is that if it didn't cost a lot, what are the odds that he jumps back in the portal? Like he comes in, he sees the lay of the land, and then says, actually, that was a little premature. I got caught up with LA and the campus and the life, and now I realize there's 17 other guys in the secondary here. Maybe I need to go somewhere else. This is sort of the world that we live in. So who knows? It may be interesting that may be the case. Because to your point also, Rye, 10 guys at safety, hard to believe that at least 3 or 4 of those guys, you don't even maybe give a look at corner and say, hey, are there some transferable skills here? So going to be interesting to see with Vance. Like, he shows up, he's like, listen, I thought I was joining a team, not a village. I mean, there's 17 other dudes here. So this is sort of the world we're living in. So maybe it's TBD if that package wasn't too high.
So I will say this, just giving a little coaching aspect to it. You got to remember there's 2 safeties. So when you say 10 safeties, there's 5 and 5, ideally, right?
That makes it better,
Well, it does though, because
that makes 10.
you travel with.
Yeah, I mean, so 2. I mean, the ratio is still the same though, right, Fred? I mean, if it's a single position, you're 5 deep, right, at free safety and at strong safety.
Right. When you're looking at 5 deep, but then you think about some of them are going to redshirt, right? Like, they're not all going to play right now. You're looking at your first 3 maybe, and then the second one may make the plane. Your first 3, the 4th may make the plane because it's due to special teams, and that'll be your special teams guy, and the 5th guy on each side is a red shirt. So we've been complaining about depth. Now we're complaining we got too much depth, right? And then we look at the corner spot. There's now 3 corners in football. When you think about it, right? You think about that nickel cornerback position. So you need an extra guy. When I was at SC, I think we had almost like 10 corners in the room. There was a lot of corners. You know what I mean? It's just a position that they load up on. You can't have too many corners, I guess. One's a return guy and this and that, all that and that. I'm good with it. The more depth, as long as they can play, right? And then you got to remember, Branch is going to come back from injury sooner or later. So technically, did you count Branch with the 10 guys, Ryan?
Yeah, I counted with the 10 safeties. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I like Branch.
Counted Jaylin Smith as a corner.
Okay, I like Branch. I hope
that's
Branch.
Fair. Yeah.
I hope Branch comes back from his recovery and doesn't miss a step and gets better. I'm a big fan of Branch. I might be more a fan of a defensive Branch than I am of the offensive Branch.
Woo!
Hate me later. I don't care.
You're just a defensive guy.
I am a defensive guy.
You're just, there's a bias there.
So who are you?
You talk about unconscious bias. There's defensive bias with Coach Rowe right there.
As we close this up, then, Coach, after the spring game, who are your starting back 5?
I'll go with the 2 UCLA guys. I can't make a starting. I can't. They got to still. I don't have a starting corners. I don't have starting corners yet. They all do so well. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's going in a fall camp. They're competing.
Of course. For me, right now, it would be Arnold and Ramsey on the back end. Jacoby Covington and Nicholson are my 2 outside corners, with Prophet Brown playing a lot of time, and then probably Smith in the slot. Humphrey's great, but he's been banged up. He didn't play. So I don't really know what we have in Humphrey yet. Obviously, we know what he did at UCLA, and we know what he can do in this defense.
Let me ask you this, Jamal, because and I'll get on greedy. I know we're going off on a tangent. Let me ask you this, Jamal. When at UCLA last year, did the corners rotate a lot, or is that an Alex Grinch thing? I've never seen corners rotate that much.
No, not that much.
Alex Grinch. You know
Humphreys played. I mean, he was a rotational piece, but I mean, he played quite a bit. I mean, they sort of. I mean, it was sort of 4 guys that rotated. So I think that I agree with Ryan on Arnold and Ramsey on the back end. That feels pretty solid. I do think Humphries is gonna make the starting rotation. I think he's gonna kind of cover some ground here down the stretch. I think you have to find a spot for. I mean, I think Beavers is a guy that he just impressed so much. And then maybe Nicholson. So I think that's probably my 5. But again, it's at the margins.
Yeah, Beavers is unique because he could play safety too.
Yeah, that's right. And so when you start doing some interesting things that D'Anton Lynn likes to do in terms of that second linebacker, whether it's strong side or weak side, then you can sort of manipulate Beavers in a lot of different ways, and that's kind of how you get that illusion of 3 hats on the ball all the time. So that's why I really like Beavers.
Yeah. All right. So I want to get to. Yeah, it is a great problem, man. We've been complaining about depth. Now we got it. So, and they're all good and they're all.
Except that interior defensive line, because
Lord
knows, an 8th corner was more important than Bear Alexander's backup. So there's still work to be done here.
Flywheel, Jamal, the flywheel effect. You know about the flywheel effect.
Yes, sir.
The wheel is moving.
Yeah.
Once the wheel moves, then it gets all the way going, and then
the only problem is I'm looking for another wheel. So the corner flywheel is great. We need to get the interior trenches flywheel going.
You're going to get hit with the line before the season even starts tomorrow. You want me to hit you with the line now in May? I wanted to save it for the season. You're going to get hit with the line now. Easy, big fella. We'll get there.
We'll get there.
So. One of the 7 deadliest sins is gluttony. You know what I mean? And gluttony is equivalent to greed. I think greed is one of the 7 deadliest sins too. Like I think you're asking for a little bit too much. You know what I mean? At some point in your life, you have to tell yourself, I am happy with what I have. I don't need any more. You know what I mean? Even when it comes down to your career, sometimes making a career. Haney learned the hard way. I need to fight Ryan Garcia. You're fighting a dude who's 20 pounds heavier than you on fight day, and you learn the hard way, like, I should have never took this fight. Like, even in business, like, it's great to be the CEO, but sometimes you're just not a CEO. But it's okay to be an executive director or, vice president. Like, sometimes you hit your limit, and it's okay. And that's all right, and it's good and successful. I don't see the reason to bring this kid in. And it always reminds me of September rosters with baseball, right? Everybody's mad at the Dodgers now, which they always do every year. They suck this time of year, and then all of a sudden June, they take off and they're perfect right before the break, and then they end up winning 100 games. But if you ever notice in September, they always start to lose a lot of games because that's when they open up the rosters and trading deadline. They bring new people in their locker room. I am convinced, Jamal's not convinced yet, but I am convinced that what they're building in their locker room is really, really good. And their core nucleus, the core Trojans on this team are policing the team and creating a championship atmosphere. You cannot eject cancer or I don't want to call him a cancer, so I'll say it like this. You don't want to take a risk of injecting cancer into your nucleus. We just talked about the numbers. There's 17 DBs. Why do you need this kid? The depth is there. It's all there. Like, what does he have that we're missing? And I don't know. And he might be the piece that's missing. But, like you said, if he counts for free, then that's fine. If he hops in the portal, guess what? That's fine. This isn't even a catch-22. It's one of those things like, if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. It is what it is. No sweat off my back. I think it was a waste of time in recruiting because we should have been recruiting up front. You know what I mean? Like, that guy should have been a defensive tackle. So those are just I'm just like, I think we're getting a little bit too. Somebody needs to slow Lincoln down now. Like, he's been on this mad push. Somebody now needs to say, hey, we can't take everybody. Let's start filling in the pieces that we really need. You've been doing great. Now let's slow down now, buddy. You're okay. You're doing good. You're fine. So That's how I feel about it. Unfortunately, like I'm not excited about it. The kid's probably good. He was the top recruit in the portal, but he's just not needed here. You know, he should have went someplace. That's what makes me think it is money, because he should have went someplace where he's needed. We don't need him. You know, so that's where I stand on it. And I'm not trying to be mean. I'm just saying, like, we don't need him. Those are my feelings. You guys got anything?
No. I just have a question, Coach. Who's the vice president in your story?
Right now?
Yeah, no, because you were like, is Greedy Vance the vice president? Is he the executive director?
No.
Okay.
No. Lincoln Riley is the CEO. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So, but you said, in life sometimes, you got to know when you're not the CEO, when you're not. So I was just wondering, was that Greedy Vance or is that just the generic? That's just a life lesson. For all our Salute to Troy listeners. You know.
And I will tell you this: good mentors.
I love it.
Good mentors will tell you where your limit is. Like, you could go try if you want to be a CEO. Go try it somewhere else. Don't burn the bridge, because if you fail, you can always come back to your company, become a VP or something like that, because they respect you. Just a little advice out there for all those people who did not get that advice. I've recently got that advice because I said something and it was like, well, hold on. Let's take it step by step. I was moving fast, so everything comes full circle.
Only on the Salute to Troy. There may be other Trojan shows, okay, but nobody gives you recruiting analysis. No one gives you personality about next year. That's balanced. We got some love, we got some hate sometimes, and then who else is going to give you the mentorship, the career mentorship?
Coach's Corner.
I mean, we got it all. Okay, this is what it is.
Straight from the Coach's Corner.
Coach's Corner is coming,
baby.
Coach's Corner is coming this fall, Wednesdays. So that means I'll have to record it on Tuesday for it to come out Wednesday, right, Ryan?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What do you mean?
All right, good. For Coach's Corner to come out Wednesday, yeah.
Oh yeah, or just do it earlier.
Ryan's like, you know what, Fred, you got to let me go so I can watch the Nuggets go and hammer the Lakers in Game 2. I mean, and get up 2-0. That's what's happening right now. Hey, that's what's going on.
He's watching it. He's speaking.
That's why he's smiling. That's why there's a pinkish hue. There's a pinkish hue to his complexion. The grin's a little bit wider. Like, we get it. Okay, we get it. This is going to be Nuggets in 5. We understand that. It's a gentleman's sweep, as Snoop likes to say.
Yeah, I'm more smiling because my daughter's right here staring at me.
All right, that's really the reason. You're getting the hook. There we go, guys. It's been fun. I enjoyed it. It's so fun. How about we do it again?
Now the off season truly begins. Let's see how these 2 months go.
Welcome to the off season. And nobody ever gives us show advice. Just give us show advice in the comments so we can keep watching. We love you guys.
2 months. It's like 4 months.
Yeah. Is it 4 months? Yeah.
May, June, July. Yeah, 3 months. May, June, July.
August,
hey, shout out real quick. Shout out Big Mike Williams back at SC. That's big news.
Yeah. I want a job at SC. What do I got to do to get a job at SC?
Yeah. Tell Coach Henny to hit you back.
Yeah, that's true.
He has your resume.
He does have my resume. Definitely.
Good stuff.
All right, guys. Ryan's getting the hook. Jamal's ready to go. And I'm just rambling. I want to go watch the Lakers. It's been fun. We'll do it again Thursday. Thank you guys for watching. It's the Bet Online Salute to Troy podcast. You know how it goes. Live free. Fight on.